I'm Mr. Shadowveil. Subscribe for your weekly dose of urban legends and haunting stories, and let's explore the shadows together.
When I was a kid, I remember moving into a new house when I was about 12 years old. It was an average house, nicer than the one we had been living in. My parents, two older sisters, and I all lived there. The house had a nice backyard, though not very large. It was mostly fenced in and featured a spacious grassy area surrounded by trees and bushes. I loved spending time outside, often playing sports in both the front and backyards. Not long after we moved in, one evening as I was about to go inside, I noticed a man standing in the back corner of the yard, next to some bushes and a tree. I didn't know who he was, but I assumed he was a neighbor, possibly from next door or behind us. It struck me as odd that he was just standing there staring at me. Feeling uneasy, I decided to head inside. After I got in, I looked out the window but didn't see him anymore. I didn't mention it to my parents, thinking it wasn't a big deal. However, I spotted the same man several more times, always in that same corner of the backyard, either just before dark or right after. One afternoon, I was home alone when I heard a knock at the front door. Initially, I didn't plan on answering, but curiosity got the better of me. When I opened the door, I was startled to see the same man standing on my front step. I still thought he was a neighbor, but I had no idea what he wanted. Unsure, I walked away and didn't answer. He didn't knock again and soon left. A few nights later, I was getting ready for bed when I happened to look out my bedroom window into the backyard. To my shock, I saw that same man walking through the yard. This time, he wasn't just standing in the corner. He was approaching our back door. He tried to open it and lingered there for a while. Feeling terrified, I quickly told my parents about him, and they called the police. When the police arrived, they searched the area and discovered the man hiding in our neighbor's backyard. It turned out he had been living in their shed without anyone knowing and had attempted to break into several houses in the neighborhood. Thankfully, I had spotted him when I did. I can only imagine what his intentions were, and it was alarming to learn that our neighbor had no idea he was there. This story takes place when I moved into my first house after living in apartments for many years. I was excited to have my own home with a small yard. The house wasn't the best, but it was decent, located in a typical neighborhood with houses lining a quiet street. After moving in, I was unpacking when I heard a knock at the front door. I opened it to find a woman standing there. She introduced herself as my neighbor and welcomed me with a box of cookies. I thought that was really nice and thanked her. We chatted briefly before she left. A few days later, she returned to borrow a screwdriver, claiming she didn't have one. I gave it to her and we exchanged small talk again. When she walked away, I realized she didn't live as close as I expected. She walked far down the street until I lost sight of her. The next day, she returned the screwdriver and I asked where she lived. She pointed down the street but didn't give me a specific address. I watched her leave again and followed her with my eyes as she walked to the end of the street and then out of sight. I found it strange that she kept visiting me without living nearby. One weekend, while mowing my lawn, I struck up a conversation with my next-door neighbor, who had lived in the area for over 20 years. I mentioned the woman and described her, but he didn't recognize her at all. He thought it was odd, too. For a few days, I didn't see her, but then one day after work, I spotted a woman in a car parked on the street. From a distance, she looked like my neighbor. When she noticed me, she quickly looked away. I hurried to my car, unsure if it was really her, trying to convince myself I was just being paranoid. Several nights later, I was watching TV late at night when I saw her again, walking on the sidewalk outside. It was unusual for anyone to be out at that hour. When she looked up and saw me, her expression changed to one of surprise, and she hurried away. Confused, I stepped outside and called out to her, but she ran into the street, jumped into a car parked a few houses down, and drove off. I was left bewildered. If she was my neighbor, why would she be driving away from my house? After that night, I never saw her again, and I still wonder who she was and what she wanted. A few years ago, I moved into a typical apartment building. I was excited about my new one-bedroom place on the second floor. Just a few days after moving in, I received a strange text from an unknown number that simply said, "Hi." I ignored it, thinking it was a wrong number. However, days later, I received another text. "I can see you." Now I was alarmed. I wondered if this was a prank or something more sinister. I texted back to ask who it was, but there was no response. I closed my blinds, feeling uneasy about the possibility of someone watching me. That night, I didn't receive any more messages. Then a few days later, I got a call from the same unknown number. Despite my nerves, I answered. A man's whisper on the other end said he knew where I lived and that I was home. I was terrified and demanded to know who he was, but he hung up. For a few days after that, everything was quiet until one night. There was knocking at my door. My heart raced as I considered the possibility that it was connected to the strange messages. I chose not to answer, and the knocking eventually stopped. When I checked afterward, no one was there. This pattern continued for several nights. Each time I would hear knocking, but when I opened the door, no one would be there. One night I decided to wait and see who it was. When the knocking started again, I peered through the peephole. I saw a man I didn't recognize. As soon as I opened the door, he sprinted away. I had no idea who he was or why he was doing this. After that night, he didn't return, and the knocking stopped entirely. A few days later, I found a pile of junk mail on my doorstep. It was strange because mail was supposed to be delivered to the mailroom, not to our doors. I picked it up and noticed one of the envelopes had a name and address on it. After a quick online search, I discovered that the man who had been knocking was the same person. I reported him to the apartment office. After that, he never bothered me again. I later learned that he was upset because his friend had wanted to move into the building, but I had taken the last unit available. I had no idea about any of this, and I was just relieved that he stopped messing with me. Years ago, my wife and I moved into a rental house. We only lived there for a year due to my job, which required frequent relocations. When we first saw the house, it looked nice, with some furniture already in place, which helped since we didn't have much. After unpacking, we went shopping for supplies. That evening, while I was downstairs, my wife came down to tell me she heard strange noises in the attic. I thought it might be an animal, but I wasn't sure. I went upstairs to check it out. At the attic door, I stood quietly, listening for a moment. Hearing nothing, I felt reassured and opened the door. As I climbed the narrow staircase, I suddenly saw a man emerging from behind a cardboard box in the attic. He had short hair and a beard and was walking straight toward me. I felt a surge of panic and quickly turned to run down the stairs. My wife, seeing my alarm, asked what was happening. I told her to run. We hurried down to the main level and left the house. While calling the police, we heard the back door open and close. We hoped the man had left. The police arrived shortly after and searched the house, but they found no one. It turned out the man had somehow entered the house, which had been vacant before we moved in. I'm just grateful that nothing worse happened.